Inclusive communication isn't an afterthought. It's a foundation for systemic change, equity, and educational justice.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Elation Communications video series on inclusive communication. You may visit elationcommunications.com to learn more about this initiative. I'm very excited about our topic today. Today, we will take a deep dive in education with a focus on inclusive communication and community school strategy. We have an expert guest today on this topic. I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Meredith Beckford Smart to the interview. Welcome, Dr. Smart.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So, Dr. Smart is a sustainable expert, Ayurveda wellness professional, author, founder, and chief visionary officer of Inspire You, which is dedicated to advancing initiatives aligned with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. As a leader in education with close to 10 years of experience implementing the community school strategy in New York City public schools, Dr. Smart fosters equity driven, whole child education models that integrate collaborative leadership, wellness, family engagement, and community partnerships for student success. With nearly 2 decades of nonprofit leadership, she drives wellness, equity, innovation, and sustainable impact through strategic programs and consulting. Dr. Smart holds a PhD in science education and supervision from Columbia University, an MA in teaching and learning from New York University, and a BS in biology from Long Island University. Her combined experience in education, organizational transformation, and holistic wellness helps to empower schools, communities, and organizations to create lasting change. So that's a lot, Dr. Smile. You've been busy in your career. Why don't you tell us a little bit of how you got started?
Yes, it's been a journey. My vision was to become a pharmacist. So I went to school, did the pharmacy track, took all of the chemistry, had an opportunity to work in two different pharmacies in New York City. And I realized that I wasn't able to make the type of impact that I envisioned for myself. It was a lot of time counting pills. So I went on, when I start something, I'm going to finish. So I finished my undergrad with a degree in bio, and I was invited to be a teacher in New York City public schools. And that was probably one of the most enlightening experiences I've ever had. I enjoyed it. And I think that kind of solidified for me that I was going to be in this for the long haul. So I wanted to figure out how can I make more impact than just one school. And so I went on and I got my master's. Thank you, New York City Public Schools, for supporting that. And then I said, hey, I'm at a crossroads. Do I want to go back to bio? Do I want to go back to science ed? And I think science ed chose me. And I went on to Columbia University, and that opened up a whole new world for me of what education could be. Started developing curriculum, gave me an opportunity to work in communities around making healthy food choices. That was the basis. I think that was the beginning for me of introducing wellness into communities through the community, working through community and engagement. And then I went on to do program management for different non-for-profits in New York City, some of the major ones and the biggest providers of after-school programming in New York City. And that's how I got into the community school movement in 2015.
You've been making a lot of impact, Dr. Smart.
Yeah.
Through your lens of expertise on community school strategy, could you go ahead and define what inclusive communication should look like in an educational setting?
Yeah, to go back to the four pillars of the community school strategy, I really think those four pillars support inclusive communications in schools, in the school ecosystem. The four pillars are collaborative leadership and practices, expanded learning time, which, some people call wraparound support or after school programming, wellness and integrated student support, and family and community engagement, which is the most important one. For me, I know that in order to support the whole child, it's a partnership, definitely with the family and in the community, supporting that school and making sure that young people can achieve. And so what inclusive communication looks like in this strategy is we take into account all voices, student voices, family, parent voices, the community voice, as well as the leadership and teachers in the school.
Okay, well, thank you for presenting these four pillars of school strategy and how that connects strongly with inclusive communication. So, could you share with us why do you believe inclusive communication is essential to effective instruction in the classroom?
So it's effective in to communication in the classroom because the school ecosystem ultimately sets the stage and the culture for what's going to happen in the classroom, right? And so for me, when anytime I'm working with a particular school, it's always creating a culture of invitation and belonging. Everyone comes in with a different experience and background, needs, learning levels, learning styles. And when you set that stage for invitation and belonging, it builds trust. It amplifies the student and family voice and ensures equity and access to all of the resources that are available in the school. And therefore, this supports culturally responsive instruction.
Mhm.
And so that's why that community school strategy is so important to young people thriving. And not only young people thriving, but also the community and family thrive. When a family thrives, the student thrives. And when the student and the family thrives, the community thrives.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Dr. Smart. So, what strategies do you use to communicate effectively with multilingual learners or students with diverse communication needs?
So, as a community school supervisor, supervising several schools in the community, we always strive to make sure that our materials that we share with families are translated in the various languages that are in the school. So it would not just be Spanish, it would also be Urdu, Creole, Haitian Creole, depending on the population and the needs that's in that particular school. One of the big initiatives that we've also done is culturally responsive training for our educators, but we've also supported trauma-informed practices for our educators and families because when you're looking at a young person, you have to also look past them as that one person sitting in the seat, but understanding that they're very layered in terms of what they come in the classroom with. So if you have a young person who may not necessarily be responsive to maybe your directions or not sitting still in the classroom, it's really being empathetic, right? And thinking about what else could be happening and what's the best way to support the child, which is also kind of come in and how do we support the family. So not only are we giving the training to our teachers, we're also training and giving professional development to the family so that we have people that are speaking common language when we're talking about young people in the school. Another way is the community partnerships that we leverage, because they bring in another layer of support in terms of they're probably in that community already and very familiar with the needs of the community, but they're resources that parents and families aren't necessarily aware of.
Mhm.
And so that also bridges a lot of our communication gaps.
Well,
And
thank you for introducing the concept of community partnerships and how that supports I would say the whole child, even their family, and the students and the teachers around them. Often there's only one dimensional look at just what the student experience is, and you've helped us to see broader than that, to see how their support system and their environment impacts their success, and how at least inclusive communication plays a significant role in that. So thank you, Dr. Smart. So we have a few more questions before we end. What are some common communication barriers in the classroom that you think are important to discuss today, and how do you address them?
So, I would say I'll just list them out. There are language accessibility gaps. I kind of spoke about that in the last question in terms of we all assume that the two major languages, English and Spanish, but there's so many more languages there. A lot of the instructors aren't bilingual. And so, it's access to materials. But what we're also making sure is that when we're placing people in schools, they are also bilingual and matching the languages that are spoken in the school. And so our community school teams also support that. There can be cultural misalignment and cultural misunderstanding in terms of, if a student is new to the country and they were in a school previously in their native country and they come to the US, how they learn and how they communicate and practices and policy in their school is probably different than the US. So it's really about how do we support that transition and what does that look like, right? And how much time do we give that young person? And not only should the young person make the transition, it's also who's supporting the young person should also make a transition to meet the student as well where they are. And
That's
then
a great segue into the next question on how can educators foster a culture of inclusive communication among colleagues, students, and families. So, can you discuss more about what that transformation or should look like to help those types of students in these settings?
yes, so, building relational trust is very important. That is the basis of all relationships. Establishing consistent two-way communication with students and families, and letting families know that this is a place that you can always come to with any question that you have and concerned, using a shared decision-making structure, which is part of the community school strategy, where we engage students, families, and community partners in shaping schools' policies initiatives, embedding restorative practices into our programming, and the school ecosystem really supports in terms of giving people opportunities to really discuss concerns and really resolve conflicts, right? In a healthy and meaningful way. And then providing professional learning communities for teachers,
Mhm.
for families to come together and really have ongoing training in culturally responsive and inclusive communication and what that could look like. So we can bridge that communication gap.
Thank you, Dr. Smart. You gave us some solid tips on how to implement this in action. Lastly, I would like to thank you for shining a light on community school strategy and how that supports the whole child and to ensure their success in the classroom. One of the key points that you made today really is about being adaptive to meet the heartfelt need of each student. And so our last question is about how do you adapt your communication style to engage students with different learning preferences and abilities?
Yes, so one of the core tenets of the community strategy is that learning is student-centered and equity-driven. And so that means adapting communication styles to engage all learners. No child is going to not be included in any of our thinking when we are thinking about the learning abilities and preferences. So, we encourage our schools to use a multiple modes of instruction, which includes visuals, hands-on activities, and digital tools, making sure that it's available in a variety of different languages. We do trauma-informed communication, recognizing that many students face external barriers impacting their engagement. It's not that they don't want to engage, there are barriers to engagement. You know, having flexible engagement strategies, so offering students different ways to participate, whether through verbal discussion, writing, peer collaboration, or just creative expression. Maybe they want to draw, maybe want to dance, right? And then strengths-based coaching. And this is where we help educators identify and amplify students' strengths, right? And ensuring that every child feels valued and capable, and every family feels valued and capable when they come into any of our school ecosystems. And
Thank you, Dr. Smart, for joining us today to share your deep insights on clearly the impact that you've been making in education throughout your career. We have learned a lot about the intersection of inclusive communication and community school strategy in the educational setting. We thank you again for joining us. We hope to have you back again really soon. For anyone who would like to stay in touch with you, how can they follow you?
you can follow me at drmeredithsmart.com. You know, you can go to my website, and you can follow me at Inspire You, the letter U, to lead. That's Inspire, INSPIRE, the number 2, lead.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Smart. We encourage you to continue the conversation on how to become an inclusive communicator. Visit us at elationcommunications.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at Jerica Talks, on YouTube at Elation Communications, on LinkedIn at Elation-Communications, and on Facebook at Elation Comms. We appreciate you joining us today, and until next time, become an inclusive communicator. Thank you.